A literal unicorn within the gun world, the VAL and the VSS used to be completely busted and escaped from Tarkov until they were nerfed into the ground. But in 12.9, they actually received a buff to the ammunition and also the recoil. So today we're going to be talking about how the VAL and VSS differ, with some strengths and weaknesses between the guns, with also a comparison about the ammo at the very end. So stick around and enjoy. Before we get into the video here today, I do want to remind you I do stream on Twitch. The link for that will be featured down in the description below if you have any questions about any of the videos you've seen recently. Jumping straight into the comparison about the difference between the VAL and the VSS. The first key difference you're going to notice is the ergo was slightly better on the VAL by 1, and the recoil is better on the VSS Vintorez in stock, which is actually really interesting. There are a few other differences like MOA, but more importantly, when you mod them both correctly to the lowest recoil, you're going to notice that they're actually exactly the same. So the only real difference between them is the VAL is actually the higher ergo version, but slightly more expensive to build. If we have a look at the price on the flea market, we will notice the VAL is roughly around 60,000 rubles on the flea market. And if we jump over towards the VSS, you're going to notice that it's sometimes cheaper, 49,000, and sometimes on the high end, 55,000, which I believe is actually a better deal. Once upon a time, you didn't really need to do too much to the VAL. In fact, I used to just throw this B3 combo mount with like a Pico 06 on the front with a laser or a tac device of some sort down below. Now this gun is still viable like this, but the recoil actually got increased a lot in this current patch. With that 75 vertical recoil, I would consider the TOS mount. And with the TOS mount, you can use anything like the Magpul RVGs or the AFG grips to actually reduce that recoil, because it's definitely necessary at this stage in the game. Now, if you're trying to save a buck, something like the Magpul AFG is actually a really good choice. It gives you good ergo, and it also gives you good recoil reduction. As for scopes, if you are on a budget, you can just use something like the OKP7 and mount it directly straight to the side. Or if you are actually out there and you like the other red dots, you can use something here called the SVD low profile mount if you go towards the other one. And you will see that it's a nice low laying dovetail mount that allows you to mount certain red dots and so forth. Now, I wouldn't use any sort of magnification on this, anything more than a monstrum, unless it's the PSO, because it's quite wild. Now, obviously, if you want to take this one step further, you can put something like the forward shift grip on there, as it has a slightly better ergo. But I would actually recommend the Magpul RVG, as it's the best of both worlds between ergo, price, and recoil reduction. Now, if we jump into the stock, you want to remove the basic stock for the VAL and the pistol grip, and you can actually put this thing called the Rota 43 VAL buffer tube adapter. With this thing, you can actually go ahead and put the Magpul Mo carbine stock on here. And as soon as you put the stock on, put the butt pad on the end of that, and that's as good as this bad boy's gonna get. If you want to squeeze one extra ergo, you can use the Zenit RP1 charging handle. Now this entire gun is actually going to cost you a fair bit, around 103,000 rubles, not including the gun. As for the VSS, the modding is pretty much exactly the same. We're going to use the TOS mount into the Magpul RVG. Now obviously you can use stuff like the RK2 if you want that recoil even lower. The same thing with the grips. I would actually recommend using the forward shift grip, as the ergo on the VSS isn't as good as the VAL. So if you do want to get it nice and snappy, I would always use the forward shift grip, but the Magpul once again is the best option here for the price. We are going to be using the SVD Low Pro with the Pico 06 on the side, as this is my favorite setup. But once again, this gun as the VSS is actually going to set you back only 68,000, not including the gun, which is actually a lot better than the VAL. Now, if we look at the two side by side, the main difference other than the price is the class. You are going to be noticing that the VSS is actually a marksman rifle. And if we go over towards the VAL, we are going to notice the VAL is an assault rifle, which means they're actually affected by different skills. You can notice there's a skill called recoil control, which lowers your recoil. There's also one here called assault rifles, which decreases the speed of your reloads, your switching, and also your recoil. So once again, if you do use a lot more assault rifles, then the VAL is going to be better. But the VSS is affected by DMRs. So if your DMR skill is higher, the VSS will have lower recoil. Now, if we look at the two side by side, we aren't going to notice that much difference. In fact, the initial kick from this gun is quite insane, but then it evens out and becomes very accurate. That's why the VAL and the VSS, in my opinion, are two amazing CQB guns, with some of the new ammo changes making them one of the hardest hitting. If we look at the recoil comparison between the two, there is hardly any difference to be seen. In fact, they're nearly identical when built the same and statistically are the same, so the only thing is the skills. As for the ammo, we saw a lot of changes, guys, and for the better. Every single ammo, from SB5 going from 35 pen to 38, as well as all the other ammos gaining a pen increase. SB6 from 43 to 46, SPP from 45 to 50, and BP from 48 to 55, making it one of the most insane rounds in Tarkov. Not only that, but something like SPP and all these other ammos are actually quite cheap on the flea market and can all be crafted in your workbench, making them even better value. I don't know why they're so cheap at the moment, maybe because everyone's sleeping on the VAL because of the Vector, but this thing is actually a diamond in the rough, and with 55 pen, that is unbelievably scary with the fire rate of the AS VAL. A popular misconception about the AS VAL is that it's inaccurate. And that's sort of true when it comes to the actual AS VAL itself. But if we have a quick look at that drop, it is quite insane. So around 150 meters, you can see the length of that drop is actually quite insane. And the distance between the top of the door at the end here to the bottom of where the drop is pretty nutty. But the VSS is actually incredibly accurate with a better MOA than the AS VAL, making it viable for sniping with SPP. Now obviously it's got a lot of recoil, but if you know how the bullet drop works, it doesn't mean that it's not accurate. In fact, I know a lot of people who snipe with this gun for fun, and when you actually understand the bullet drop of this gun and how quiet it can be, it is devastating to verse, especially because it is subsonic. There is no bullet crack when you are getting shot at with this gun, and you would have no idea where they are at distance. If you have a look at the grouping, you will notice the VSS is slightly better here, but that is some huge distance when I'm firing here. Another really interesting thing about the PSO is that when it's on the VAL, the zeroing on here is just bang on. So it's actually designed for this scope, and the way it sits on the scope allows the zeroing to actually work really well depending on your field of view. But you will notice once I bump it up to 150 zero, it's pretty much dead accurate on the chevron, just slightly high depending on where I'm aiming at the time. This is actually pretty awesome for sniping, but I wouldn't 100% recommend it, but it is a lot of fun to use. I am also working on an ammo testing guide with the updated values at the moment, guys. I know I have a video currently which shows the old values, but I will be working on a new one after I get back from holiday. But once again, I wanted to point out, guys, that even though this video isn't updated, it still gives you a really good look into how insane the ammo is, and you can actually deduct that it would be even better than this now. Now, obviously, the ammo did get better, but the recoil across the board did get an increase. So when you are using the AS VAL, do respect the recoil on this gun. And that's why in some of the modding, I would maybe suggest sometimes going for that RK2 if you really just can't handle that recoil. Hey guys, that's it for this video. If you enjoyed this video about the VAL or want to see me do this for other guns, maybe consider subscribing. Once again, I will be working on the ammo testing video, so you don't want to miss that. Thanks so much for watching to the very end, and as always, we'll see you on the next one.